Welcome to episode 1 of the Lemme Finish Podcast, hosted by Figure 8. I am your host, Figure 8. Thank you guys for coming to this episode 1. If you are listening, the reason I started this was to, get more and more into podcasting, as I think it's something I'm going to enjoy, but also, what better thing to talk about than the thing I know the best, which is my group, and how long it took for my group, the Antelope Fishermen, to get where it's at now. So if you're listening to this, you're probably a fan of me or the group, or you somehow stumbled upon this podcast, whatever that reason may be. I hope I do a pretty good job entertaining you. It is very, very awkward to be by yourself in a room recording into a microphone. I didn't even know people did solo podcasts, so as much as I'd like everything else I'm doing to be very strict and professional, I think I'm going to try and have this be as raw and vulnerable as it can be. So I'm not going to cut out a lot of ums and ands and stuff. I'll just do my best not to say them. So with that being said, I think this first episode we should more so just discuss how this came about and the pre-group. I think the intent is going to be that each season will cover the year after year of our progress to get here. So this does and will eventually have an end, and I'll probably start it in a different form, or it'll take on a new form. I'm not sure yet, but the first season is going to be pre us actually becoming a group, and I don't want to focus too much about my personal journey to get here. So it's going to be mostly about the Antelope Fishermen and the group, the founding members and stuff like that. But in order to tell the full story, we definitely have to start prior to that. So I think the first season's going to be pretty short, just to see if I can do this whatsoever, and see if anybody gives a shit. So without further ado, this is episode 1. I started rapping when I was about 8 years old, and I think by the time I was 9, I was in a rap group with other people in my second grade class. And I don't think we actually wrote a song to a beat ever. Like, we would just write things we thought were funny and considered ourselves a band. Like, to the point that I went and got those print-on t-shirts that you iron on the logo. And I made a really terrible logo in Photoshop. I found a heart that had wings on it and just put all of our names in that heart pretty poorly, and then had this very pixelated image on t-shirts that we all wore all the time. But from the very beginning, the whole idea of me being a musician was because I wanted a group, some sort of family, some sort of camaraderie, and that culminated in group after failed group. But I think everything that I learned along those processes, even from such a young age, still come into effect. So the second group I was in was called, that first one that I had the t-shirts for, was called The Lost Memories, which reminds me of the group in Airheads, the band with Brendan Fraser and Adam Sandler, the Lone Rangers. We were the Lost Memories, which makes no sense, because Lone Rangers would be, doesn't make sense that there's multiple of them if they're the Lone Rangers, and if we're the Lost Memories, it's not something that you remember. It's whatever. We were 9 years old. We did sell one of those t-shirts. I was very proud of that. The second group I was in was called Traffic Jam, and I made that one when I was probably about 11 or 12. I was constantly making people who weren't musicians be musicians, just because actual musicians didn't want anything to do with a child that didn't know what he was doing. So I was often just convincing people that they could rap, I could write the raps for them, they could write something themselves, they can learn how to produce, whatever I needed to get someone on board that wasn't me. And Traffic Jam I made out of kids at my parents were Jehovah's Witnesses and tried to raise me as them, so I found a bunch of kids who also were just kind of awkwardly going through the motions, and didn't want to be there, had different levels of suspended belief in the faith, didn't really know it, that we were very, very, very young. So we let that last for about 3 or 4 years before I think 1 or 2 of the members decided to pursue their faith a little more intensely, and then it just kind of fell apart. And then I got kicked out of my parents' house about when I was 14, 15, around there. And I had a girlfriend at the time from high school, and her little brother wanted to make beats, so we started making beats. And then we very shortly after that started recording. I traded in, my grandparents had given me some Italian gold necklaces, and I traded them in, regrettably, at a pawn shop. But I did buy a microphone and a laptop with that to give me the ability to make music. At first, it was just me and my ex's little brother at the time. And eventually we added a singer-songwriter who played guitar, a few girls that sang background vocals, and maybe one other rapper. And we called that Crim's Knob. I still have that with everyone's logo tattooed on the back of my legs. I would say that is the earliest version of what the Antelope Fishermen became, for sure. We attempted to be both a group and a label. The idea was we could all release solo projects under this banner and then come together and release songs as a collective, which is what eventually the Antelope Fishermen ended up being. But as Crim's Knob, we released two people's mixtapes onto DatPiff and iTunes. We released my first solo mixtape, whatever it was, onto DatPiff and iTunes. And we didn't really do any shows. We did get to perform a few of the songs we made at like school assemblies. And the school we went to was a charter school, K through 12. So it was like, 1,100, 1,200 people at those shows because it was every single grade and every single faculty member. I say all that to say pretty much everything I've told you is an exact, there's a direct parallel to the things we do now as adults who do this more professionally. And I think an important part of the story is that we were doing it, or at least I was doing it to some form since I was 8, 9, 10 years old. We eventually purchased a feature from Token, the rapper out of Massachusetts, the white kid, and Bizarre of D12. And, I was homeless in 14, negotiating prices for features with, Bizarre has a diamond plaque with Eminem and multiple platinum records with D12, and Token ended up going on to do big things, touring with Hobson and Tech Nine and stuff. We kind of had beef with both of them for a little while as a side note, but me and Bizarre have since squashed whatever that was, but me and Token have not. In fact, I would say it's gotten worse every year. Either way, again, from making t-shirts to recording and releasing solo artist albums under the banner, to distributing things to online platforms at a time in which people weren't really doing that. I would say I didn't know very many people who knew how to release music digitally, nor did they want to. I also sold flash drives full of the music and CDs full of the music from our different artists at the time. But then I moved out to Portland once I graduated, and that was kind of the death of Crim's Knob for sure, because my ex's little brother at the time was only like 15 or 16, so he couldn't come with me. And Guy, who was our singer-songwriter, ended up going into the military, so pretty quickly it fell apart. We weren't a big enough group to sustain any sort of changes. So when I got here, it was an effort to try and continue working with Crim's Knob for the first year for sure. But nothing was getting done. I was just recording freestyles and posting them on Facebook at that time, essentially, and I had lost all my producers, so I was back into trying to poorly make my own beats. It was about that time that I met Gareth, who was my first friend in Oregon. I lived in Gresham, and I thought that was Portland because I had just moved here. I had no idea. I had never been downtown. I hadn't seen downtown. There's not a lot of talk about Portland in Detroit, where I'm from. So eventually, I had to start finding other people and meeting other people. So Gareth was like my first friend. He took me downtown for the first time. He took me out to a lot of the landmarks in Oregon, Portland area for my first times. And then he got approved for a house with 4 or 5 of his oldest friends. And I began going there pretty much every single night to hang out. But that first night he took me out to the back porch and said, this is my friend Ian. He also makes music. This is Michael. He goes by Figure 8. He's a rapper. And within 20 minutes, me and Ian, who is now, people know him as Young Ned, created a band called Noise from the Void. We released our first album as Noise from the Void last year, but that was supposed to be like a side project. I was like, okay, I can work on the rap group later once I find more musicians that fit that demographic, that brand. And then at the current moment, at the very least, I could write and be creative and experiment with this classically trained musician who played every single instrument, which is just so far from, kids in the hood downloading cracked software to try and make hip-hop on a laptop. And that's where I come from, and I think that's where hip-hop comes from, something from nothing, the art of rap. So I wasn't ashamed of any of that for sure, but I always touted myself as wanting to be the best, wanting to be a great musician. I wanted to earn Grammys one day, all that great bullshit. So I did my best to try and go outside my comfort zone, and young Ned was very, very, very artsy. He listened to Tool and old Genesis pre-Phil Collins and things like that. So a lot of what we did was not things that I think any rappers have been made to do. And coming from, battle rap and poorly made garage music, I didn't know what bars were. I didn't know what time signatures were. And here I am trying to rap on things that are in time signatures I don't think any hip-hop song had ever been in. So it was a lot of effort, and I don't think we made a single good song at that time. And we certainly didn't record anything, but I really, truly learned how music worked during that time period. And then shortly after that, I met Tag through young Ned's girlfriend at the time. They were very, very close friends since like kindergarten, so he started coming around, and eventually he started bringing around his best friend, who was Andrew. And I don't really think any of us know how we got to this next step per se, but we all began slightly talking about how, despite the goofiness and lack of talent that we have, there is a camaraderie here that I think could be marketable. So everyone in that house began to just, even the people who were never going to record or make music were just freestyling, and we'd be getting drunk, smoking, and I don't know, we were 18, 19, all of us had just gotten out of high school. I had just moved here from Detroit to Portland, and it was a very explorative time for sure. And we used to get into these freestyle sessions, and Gareth is as white as they come in a duck fancy hat, and it was some of the worst raps that anyone could ever spit. They were so hilarious, though. They were so funny. And me and young Ned were always like, this is the rap group, which was a joke. And I don't, the most common question we get is, how did you guys get the name the Antelope Fishermen? And I truly believe it was me, Tag, Andrew, and young Ned at first, along with Chris and Gareth, who didn't make music and had no intention of making music, but we were like, well, you guys can be the managers and you can be the accountants. We tried to include them just as much a member of that founding group. But I think we just kept saying maybe this is the rap group. I don't think we called it anything at that time. And it took until the idea was not, there was no other vocalists. It was Andrew was working on making beats for the first time. Young Ned was trying to help me learn how to sing and rap better. And then Tag was just hanging out. And one day, Tag was like, when are you going to ask me to be in the group? And I hadn't even really realized that we were a group, or we were a collective, or we were anything at that time. So I was like, sure, start if you want to. I didn't even know that was something you wanted to do. So if you want to start producing, start writing, or whatever. So he started making beats too. So essentially it became sessions of me in my sister's garage in the closet trying to record a solo album off of exclusively beats that Tag and Andrew were making. And young Ned wasn't super involved in the hip hop stuff, but I was going over there, 2-3 times a week just working on Noise from the Void shit that would never see the light of day. So around that time, we started spitballing the idea of calling ourselves a group, but it really didn't happen. It eventually was like a joke, because Gareth would be rapping and I would try and rap with him and do better. I would try and write him raps to make him better, that we needed some sort of name, and we just kept throwing shit at the wall. It was like I always say the zebra huntsman is the opposite of the antelope fisherman, but it really was, we were just throwing around shit like that, like the blue oranges, the race car track drivers, it was just trying to be, My name's Figure Eight, and if you Google Figure Eight, you're going to get knot tying lessons, some naval maneuvers, and a Ellie Goulding song. I have such an ungoogleable name. You'll see a racetrack before I come up. So I really wanted it to be something that no matter what or where or what your search history or preferences were in your phone, that if you searched the Antelope Fishermen, we would come up. So that's kind of how we ended up there. I think Tag might have said the Antelope Fishermen. It just rolled off the tongue. It just was so, if someone was on stage and said, "Hi, we're the Antelope Fishermen," it's going to be pretty fucking hard to forget that name. You hear, "Hi, I'm Figure Eight. Hi, I'm Tag Smith. Hi, I'm Young Ned." These could just fall off of some smooth brain. But the Antelope Fishermen is going to be something that at least you might ask about before you leave the venue. So that's what we went with, and that was 2016. So that was the very birth of the group. It was just, as far as musicians go, it was me as a vocalist, a rapper, and I wasn't really singing at that time. And then it was Young Ned, me and him working on Noise from the Void, Tag and Andrew, and to a little bit of an extent, my ex's little brother. He left pretty early on, very amicably. Me and his sister broke up, and he did his best to still finish the projects we were working on and producing, and this was a couple years after that. But he was always very, very distant because we were out here and he was in Michigan, and then he got out here and tried to contribute, but me and his sister were rocky, so it was kind of a mess. And I still, shout out Nick, man. I don't know where he is anymore. He's one of the few people in my life I've lost contact with, and I really hope he's doing okay because we wouldn't be here without him. Right around there is when it actually started to feel like something, though. We were having sessions, we were recording, we were trying to produce, we were trying to learn, and we had a name. We were the Antelope Fishermen. So the true founding members were me, Young Ned, Andrew, and Tag, and we include Chris and Gareth in that because they Gareth didn't own, but helped get that house. He was like the leader of that house, paying the bills and helping keep it together. And Chris was one of the people that moved in, and they were all friends since childhood that accepted me into their little mixed mash family very, very well. I was very, very happy being there and being with them, spending the night as often as I could. I think that will probably do it for episode 1. That is a really condensed version of the first 10 or 11 so years of me getting to the point where the group existed. And again, the point of the podcast is I want to just talk about the history of the fish. Each year of the fish I don't know if I can stretch it out into a full season. I might just get through the whole story as succinctly as I can, and then go back and try and dissect years. I'm still really unsure about the format, but I know that this is essentially going to be the discussion, and I'm down to change things up based on how it's received. So thank you guys for stopping by, and before you interrupt, let me finish.